We're continuing our coverage of effects here in Audition. This time we're going to look at modulation effects. If you want to follow along, get these two files, saxophone and vocal, inside the working files music subfolder, just couldn't be that way subfolder, and then down here vocal excerpt and saxophone excerpt. So what are the modulation effects? Let's check that out. There are 4 modulation effects, but really 3 types of effects: chorus, flanger, and phaser. Why are they called modulation? That's because modulation in music means typically a key change, but it could also be a pitch change or some other kind of change. And each of these effects uses a delay, where there's just a little bit of audio that's delayed, like an echo or reverb, or just like the delay effect. But here they're delayed in a rhythmic way. So the chorus, the rhythm is even, it's consistent, it's predictable. Whereas the flanger, the repeat, is not predictable, it varies. And whereas the phaser, the delay, is actually a phase shift that goes up and down in pitch at the high end of the pitch. So the chorus sounds like a thickening of the audio, or maybe more than one instrumentalist or vocalist. The flanger sounds kind of like a wah-wah, kind of back and forth, a little bit of wah-wah because of the variability to the delay. And the phaser sounds sort of like a wave, kind of going back and forth. But they're all similarly constructed, and they belong here inside the modulation group. We're going to look at these 3 here first, and then we're going to open up chorus last, because I want you to switch the files to stereo when we work with the chorus. We're going to start with the easiest of the 4 effects, the chorus flanger, here inside the saxophone. Chorus flanger has only 4 properties. And as you go through all these effects, there are lots of properties, and I'm not going to explain them in detail, but I do want you to know that you can always go to the help file and check out individual effects to see what these guys all stand for. Plus, it's a little confusing because they use different terms for the same thing. Here they use intensity, when this has been the wet-dry mix on several other effects. Basically, if you have the intensity down towards 0, that means it's dry. The original file is what you hear. If you have it more toward the right side, the wet side, or the higher intensity side, you hear more of the affected part of the file. So when you see intensity, it's also the same as wet-dry. So let's just take a look at some of the presets. I want to look at the chorus preset first on this saxophone. So let's go up here and switch over to heavy chorus. Now what we should hear here is sort of a thickening of the sound, like there's more than one saxophone. And I'll turn it on and off as we listen. So I think you get a sense that when you turn that on, it does feel like there's more than one instrument. It also has kind of this sort of metallic wah-wah kind of effect. So it's your taste as to whether it's something you want to use. But keep in mind, you can check out all kinds of different presets. And once you open up a preset, you can change some of these characteristics here and see if it works for you. Let's switch over to a preset that's on the flanger side of this effect. And we'll go down to springy flanger. There we go. Let's see what that one sounds like. Now you notice that the intensity is only about 30. I'm going to increase the intensity and see what difference that makes. We're going to get that metallic sound inside this chorus flanger effect. Let's switch over to the vocal side of things and try the chorus flanger on that. Now with the chorus, when you've got a vocalist, you sort of hope that it'll sound like more than one vocalist. That's the goal here. So I'm going to switch over to thick chorus, as you've already got that set up. Let's see what that sounds like.
Couldn't give you what you wanted. I couldn't give what you were asking for.
So again, there's that kind of metallic, like we're singing inside some kind of tin can feel to it. So I'm not totally sold on it, but if you use just the chorus effect, the standalone chorus effect, there is a preset there that does work pretty well. It doesn't have that metallic feel to it. Let's switch over to a flanger side of things where you can't miss the sort of metallic sound. We're going to go to the water flange. That sort of sounds like you're underwater.
I couldn't give you what you wanted. I gave you all.
Underwater or inside a drain pipe. Let's drop this basic effect here and then move on to the specialized flanger effect and open that up here inside the vocalist. I'm going to start with the robotic sound for her. It really does sound like it's coming out of some science fiction movie.
I couldn't then some more. I couldn't give you what you wanted.
And here you do see the dry, wet mix here as opposed to the term intensity. And there are lots of other presets here. We'll just stick with one now per example as we go forward. Let me switch over to the saxophone side of things and drop this guy and open up the flanger. And look at the preset for it. We're going to see the light flange first. You can can barely tell it, but I'm going to switch over to wet here and see what that sounds like. So more of a wavy kind of a sound to it, kind of up and down a little bit. Let's drop the flanger and move on to the phaser, which uses that change in phase as it goes up and down at a higher pitch. It's not named after a science fiction weapon, folks. It's named because they use a shifting phase to create the effect. And so for the saxophone here, let's try the underwater. I do want to try 2 with this one because the phaser is just such a wild and crazy effect. It does sound like he's kind of blowing bubbles with the saxophone. Let's switch over to brain ball, which sounds kind of like it goes pop, pop, pop as it goes along. Wild. Let's switch over to the vocal excerpt side of things and look at the phaser for her. And we're going to just try a really weird effect here called Led Zeppelin, or a preset called Led Zeppelin from those heavy metal days. Let's check it out here.
I gave you all I could and then some more.
All right, so you get a sense of how the phaser works. It has a kind of wavy kind of sound back and forth. Okay, now I want you to do a little bit of work here before we use the chorus effect. I want you to convert each of these files to stereo. The chorus effect does not work very well on a monaural file. In fact, none of these guys work as well on a monaural file as they do on a stereo file. So typically when you work with a studio session or record a vocalist, you use a monaural mic or a monaural pickup. And so almost all those files would be monaural. If you want to use one of the modulation effects on them, it's probably best to convert it to stereo. But when you want to use the chorus effect, it's definitely best to convert it to stereo. So I'm going to take this file and convert it to stereo. It's very simple. Any file here inside the waveform editor in the waveform view of the editor panel, just go to Edit, Convert Sample Type. It opens up this dialog box. Oh, it's saying, by the way, that you're going to get rid of all these things you put on here when you convert it. And let's just click on this. Now it's going to open up this dialog box. And we're going to keep the sample rate, and we're going to go to 32-bit depth, which is good. And then here's the channel option. We want stereo as opposed to mono or 5.1. Click OK, and boom, we now have the stereo file. Let's switch over to the saxophone, same routine. Close this guy down. We're going to go Edit, Convert Sample Type, get this warning again. Say, yep, it's OK, and convert it to stereo. Now we've got 2 stereo files. Now we're going to apply a chorus to them directly. We could have applied it here in the effects rack, but we'll go to Effects and go to Modulation and Chorus here on the saxophone side of things. And I just want to use a preset here, but take a look at what we've got here in terms of the options before I do that. You can see it's just a little more complex than the rest of the guys we've been encountering so far. Let's go on up here for the sax, and we'll get an acoustic duet. You hope that the chorus is going to make it sound better, not sound metallic, not sound wavy, or sound like a wah-wah. So if you just pick acoustic duet, you hope that you're going to get just basically a thicker sound of the sax. Let's try that out. That sounds pretty good. I'll turn it off so you hear the difference. And here's a nice little checkbox. Highest quality utilizes more processing. With computers these days, you shouldn't have to worry too much about pushing them a little bit harder. So if you want the sound to be a little bit better, do check this checkbox. All right, let's switch over to the vocal. And here the goal hopefully is to make her sound like there's more than one of her and not make it sound phony. So let's just open up the effects, modulation, chorus again. I'm going to take the first one that doesn't work that well, the rich chorus. Yes, it's rich, but does it really work? Let's see.
I couldn't give you what you wanted. I couldn't give what you were asking for.
So I'm not totally convinced on that one, but let me switch over to the subtle vocal chorus. And when I do that, let's see what happens. These numbers get relatively low here, which is typically what you need to do, except for the spread. And let's just see how that sounds.
I couldn't give you what you wanted. I gave you all I could and then some more.
So I think that's much better. If you're looking to kind of expand the sound of a single vocalist, you might want to try the subtle vocal chorus preset inside the chorus and then perhaps make some adjustments. Over here, there's a checkbox that says average left and right channel input. You don't want to use that when you've taken a monaural file and then broken it out into a stereo file. That would be counterproductive, so don't click that. And the stereo field basically expands the stereo breadth. Here it's all the way out. You might want to narrow it down so it's not so obvious that we're kind of bouncing things left and right. So that's a basic look at the 4 modulation effects here at Adobe Audition.